Imagine a land where words were more than ink on parchment. They were sacred. In Ethiopia, for centuries, monks, priests, and kings guarded books not as simple writings, but as vessels of power. Manuscripts that told the story of their people, their faith, their victories, and their dreams. Inside these pages live the voices of ancestors, the memory of dynasties, and secrets that no other nation on earth possessed. Now picture a silence, one that came after footsteps, soldiers marching, doors breaking, and hands reaching for those very books. Not to burn them, not to destroy them, but to take them. A theft so complete that it left a kingdom hollow, robbed not just of parchment, but of memory itself. This wasn't the fire of Alexandria. No, these manuscripts did not vanish in smoke. They were carried off, boxed, cataloged, and shipped away like plunder. Some of them still exist today, in museums, in libraries, in collections far from the soil where they were born, but many more are missing, scattered, or hidden, their whereabouts cloaked in mystery. What exactly was taken? That is the question that haunts this story. Were these only religious texts, prayers bound in leather? Or did the soldiers take something else? Political chronicles, ancient maps, books of medicine, or secrets of the Ethiopian court that outsiders were never meant to read? Eyewitnesses speak of carts heavy with manuscripts, of shelves emptied in a single night. Hundreds, maybe thousands of books disappearing, leaving behind nothing but dust and broken locks. To the Ethiopians who watched it unfold, this wasn't just looting. It was an attack on their very soul, a wound that still bleeds to this day. And yet, here lies the deeper mystery. If so many books were stolen, where are they all now? Some, we know, were shipped to Britain after the Battle of Magdala in 1868. Today, you can still walk into the British Library or the Bodleian and find them locked in glass cases. But whispers tell of others, texts that never made it to those halls. Were they lost at sea? Were they hidden away in private collections? Or did some vanish into darker hands, kept secret because of what they contain? Think about this. If the Magdala manuscripts held secrets, secrets of royal bloodlines, alliances, or even prophecies, who would benefit most from keeping them out of Ethiopia's reach? And why, after more than a century, has so little been done to return them? This isn't just a tale of theft. It's a mystery of erasure, of knowledge removed so cleanly that entire chapters of history were silenced. But history has a way of whispering back. Today, Ethiopia continues to demand their return. Scholars continue to track fragments across the world, and every recovered book brings new questions. What else lies missing, and what truths might be waiting inside the ones still hidden? So tonight, we open that vault of silence. We peel back the story of a single night when soldiers took more than treasure. They took a nation's soul, and the deeper we go, the more unsettling the questions become. Imagine a land where history does not just live in ruins or broken monuments, but in words. Ethiopia's past was written in ink, on parchment, in books that were not simply books, but vessels of memory, guardians of faith, and symbols of royal power. For centuries, Ethiopia was a kingdom of dynasties, legends, and empires. Its rulers claimed descent from none other than King Solomon of Israel and the Queen of Sheba, a lineage that tied Ethiopia's destiny to one of the oldest biblical bloodlines. But this wasn't just political theater. This belief shaped the way Ethiopia preserved its history. Every king, every war, every prophecy was carefully recorded in chronicles and sacred texts. Inside monasteries perched on cliffs, guarded by monks who treated ink as a holy relic, manuscripts were copied and preserved. Some contained hymns, prayers, and biblical texts, spiritual lifelines for a Christian nation that had adopted the faith as early as the 4th century. Others were filled with royal decrees, genealogies, and chronicles that tracked the rise and fall of dynasties. But among them were works far more mysterious. Books of medicine written in ancient Gayas, filled with remedies from plants and minerals. Astronomical scrolls charting the stars with symbols that carried both science and prophecy, and whispers of texts that dealt with forbidden knowledge. The kinds of manuscripts not meant for curious eyes beyond Ethiopia's borders. These weren't just records of a kingdom. They were fragments of humanity's collective memory, a story of how faith, science, and power intertwined in ways the modern world barely understands. And yet, here lies the mystery. Because some of these manuscripts, the most sacred of all, should still be in Ethiopia today. Instead, their pages rest in distant libraries, sealed in vaults, or scattered in private collections across Europe. How did they leave? Who took them? And why does the world rarely speak of them? The treasure of Ethiopia's past was not destroyed in one night of fire, nor lost in the chaos of battle alone. No, the story is more subtle. It is a tale of manuscripts quietly disappearing, of catalogs mysteriously incomplete, of treasures removed long before anyone realized they were gone. And here is the most haunting thought. Some of these texts, royal chronicles, sacred prophecies, lost gospels, might still be hidden in plain sight today, mislabeled, forgotten, or locked behind doors only a few have the keys to. As we dive deeper, remember this. The mystery of Ethiopia's sacred books is not just about what was written on parchment centuries ago. It is about what those words meant: power, authority, legitimacy, knowledge that could confirm dynasties or topple them, truths that could strengthen a faith or challenge it. So the question is not only who stole Ethiopia's sacred books, but what secrets were they so desperate to take? Imagine standing on the high, windswept plains of Ethiopia in 1868. The air is thin, the horizon endless, and in the distance, a fortress rises above the mountains. Magdala, the stronghold of Emperor Tewodros II. To the British soldiers marching toward it, this was just another military expedition. But history would remember it as something far darker and far stranger. The official reason for the march was simple: free a group of British prisoners held by the emperor. That was the story told in Parliament. That was the reason printed in the newspapers. But when the fortress finally fell, the mission no longer looked like a rescue. It looked like something else entirely. Because inside Magdala's walls lay not only soldiers and weapons, but something infinitely more valuable. Piles upon piles of manuscripts, ancient books, hand-painted scrolls, leather-bound records, texts that had survived centuries of Ethiopian kings, priests, and scholars. Knowledge stored carefully, passed down like treasure. When the gates opened, it wasn't only soldiers who entered. Behind them came officers, scholars, collectors, even opportunists. Their boots echoed on stone floors as they stepped into the emperor's libraries, into churches, into storerooms. And here, they found what many had secretly hoped for all along. Some accounts speak of the British forces looting nearly 350 ancient manuscripts from just one church alone. Others describe entire camel caravans loaded with crates of books and treasures, carried away under the banner of war spoils. These weren't just random texts. They were sacred writings, royal chronicles, theological debates, and songs that captured the soul of Ethiopia's history. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, what happens when knowledge is stolen, not destroyed? The fortress of Magdala may have burned in the fighting, but the most precious loss was not fire. It was removal. Quiet hands lifting manuscripts from their shelves one by one until the shelves were bare. And here lies the haunting question. Were the British liberators or looters? To some, they saved the manuscripts from destruction. To others, they robbed Ethiopia of its cultural heartbeat. Even today, many of those stolen texts lie far from their home, locked in glass cases in libraries and museums across Europe. They are admired by the world, yet mourned by the people to whom they truly belong. But let's not move too quickly. The story of Magdala is not just about loss, it is about mystery. For not every book taken that night was recorded. Not every manuscript was cataloged. Whispers persist of sacred texts so dangerous, so powerful that they vanished without ever reappearing. Did certain collectors keep them hidden? Were they deliberately erased from the list to ensure no trace remained? The night Magdala fell, history did not just lose a fortress, it lost a memory. And what remains for us now are fragments, clues scattered in archives and museums waiting to be pieced together. Yet with every fragment comes another question. How much was hidden away? How much was never revealed? And how much was silenced forever? They came for battle, but what they carried away was not soldiers, not captives, Not even the spoils of war as we usually imagine them. They carried away memory, they carried away centuries, they carried away the very soul of Ethiopia. When the dust of Magdala settled and the mountain fortress had fallen silent, the soldiers of the British expedition began to load their ships. But these ships would not sail back home heavy with weapons or prisoners. Instead, they groaned under the weight of something far more powerful. Knowledge, imagine it, thousands of manuscripts, bound in leather, filled with the wisdom of generations. Ancient chronicles written in Ge'ez, the sacred language of Ethiopia. Royal decrees sealed by kings long dead. Hymns, prayers, stories, and philosophies that had lived on the lips of monks for centuries, now torn from the monasteries where they had been guarded like treasure. But it wasn't just books. Gleaming crosses of gold and silver, relics once kissed by pilgrims, sacred icons that had watched over cathedrals, all packed into crates, stacked high, and marched out of Ethiopia under foreign flags. Even the personal crown of Emperor Tewodros himself, stripped from the ruins of his court, would leave the highlands forever. And as the soldiers carried these objects down the mountain, the silence was broken not by cheers, but by the low murmur of realization. This was not only the plundering of a fortress, it was the draining of a civilization's lifeblood. The manuscripts alone tell the scale of what was lost. Over 350 chests were filled with writings. Some ended up in the British Museum, where they sit in glass cases even today. Others were auctioned off to private collectors. Many simply vanished, disappearing into dusty libraries or personal estates across Europe. Their titles never cataloged, their words never read again. But here is where the mystery deepens. What exactly was inside those manuscripts? Some were religious texts, yes, but others may have contained royal chronicles, maps, and histories older than Europe itself. Accounts of Ethiopia's ties to the biblical Ark of the Covenant, records of trade stretching back to the time of Solomon, philosophies untouched by Western hands. And then comes the most haunting question of all. How many secrets slipped through history's fingers that night, never to return? How many writings were burned, misplaced, or left to rot in private collections? How many truths about Ethiopia's past remain locked away, or worse, lost forever? The story of the loot that crossed the sea is not just about objects. It is about what those objects represented. A living connection between a people and their past, severed in a single night. The ships that sailed back to Britain carried not just relics, but power. The power of memory, of story, of identity. And once taken, that power was no longer Ethiopia's alone. Even today, walking through museums, you might glimpse fragments of what was stolen. A manuscript displayed under sterile lights, a golden cross tucked behind glass. Beautiful, yes, but stripped from the sacred context that once gave them meaning. They are like hearts torn from a body, still beating, but far from where they belong. And so the question lingers. If these manuscripts could speak, what would they tell us? Would they reveal forgotten chapters of human history? Would they change the way we understand not just Ethiopia, but the world itself? Because in the end, this was not just Ethiopia's loss. It was humanity's. They were carried away in the smoke of war, their leather bindings cracked but strong, their pages filled with a wisdom that had survived centuries. The British officers who loaded them onto wagons after the Battle of Magdala in 1868 believed they were trophies. But for Ethiopia, they were not just books. They were living memory, songs, scriptures, prophecies, and histories that carried the voice of an entire nation. For a time, the world believed these manuscripts were safe. Many were cataloged, recorded in lists, and placed inside the libraries of Britain. Scholars studied them. A few even praised their beauty. But then, something strange began to happen. Not all the manuscripts could be found. Some were carefully noted in the records of soldiers and priests. But when researchers later searched for them, they were gone. No trace, no shelf mark, no entry in a public catalog. It was as if they had slipped through history's fingers. So what happened to them? Were they deliberately hidden, smuggled away by men who realized their worth? Or perhaps, were they sold quietly into private collections, never again to be seen by Ethiopian eyes? The question lingers like smoke after a fire, impossible to ignore. impossible to answer fully. And yet, the mystery only deepens when we look closer, because whispers began to circulate, rumors that some of these vanished manuscripts carried more than scripture. They carried secrets, accounts of Ethiopia's kings that clashed with European records, prophecies that spoke of the fate of empires, ancient knowledge of medicine, astronomy, and history that rivaled anything found in Europe at the time. Imagine for a moment the power of such texts. A single book could alter the story of Africa's past. A prophecy could unsettle the politics of a colonial empire. A cure hidden in an ancient script could change the balance of knowledge between nations. Would such knowledge be allowed to remain in the open? Or would it be quietly locked away, sealed in archives where only a select few could ever touch it? Some scholars argue that's exactly what happened, that colonial powers, upon realizing the manuscripts held more than just prayers and hymns, chose silence. Instead of sharing these discoveries with the world, they buried them in restricted collections, where even today access is tightly controlled. But there is another darker possibility. What if the manuscripts were never lost by accident, but erased on purpose? What if they contained ideas, histories, or truths that certain hands did not want revealed? Knowledge that threatened the carefully constructed story of empire and conquest. The truth is, no one knows. And perhaps that is the greatest wound of all, because every vanished manuscript is not just a missing book. It is a missing voice, a missing truth, a story that should have been told, but instead lingers in silence. And here lies the most haunting question of all. If so many of the Magdala manuscripts remain missing to this very day, what might still be hidden in the shadows of forgotten archives or on the shelves of private collectors? How much of Ethiopia's past and humanity's shared story was stolen, not only in body but in silence? The night the manuscripts vanished was not just a moment of theft. It was the night knowledge itself disappeared into the unknown. And yet, every mystery leaves a trail, and every silence raises a voice. Which brings us to an even bigger question, the one that still echoes after more than 150 years. Where are the Magdala manuscripts now? History does not vanish, it waits. And sometimes it waits far away from home. Today, in the great libraries of Europe, sit treasures that were never theirs to keep. Books bound in fading leather, manuscripts written on ancient parchment, prayers whispered into ink centuries ago. Each page carries the heartbeat of Ethiopia, yet the people it belongs to must travel across seas just to see it. Ethiopia has never forgotten. For decades, they have asked, pleaded, demanded, reminded the world for the return of what was taken. Sometimes the response has been silence, sometimes a polite refusal, and once in a while a single manuscript is sent back, a token gesture, a quiet acknowledgement of a wrong that cannot be denied. But the truth is harsher. Most of Ethiopia's stolen works remain locked behind foreign walls, shelved in quiet rooms, cataloged with neat labels, guarded not by armies, but by glass and keys. Visitors marvel at them, scholars study them, yet few stop to ask, how did they arrive here? And why are they still here? To Ethiopia, these books are not just relics. They are memory, they are identity, they are the voices of ancestors, the songs of kings, the laws, the wisdom, the faith of generations. To see them scattered across Europe is to see fragments of a soul torn apart. Imagine for a moment, what would it feel like if your family's most sacred inheritance, the diaries, the letters, the sacred texts of your people, were taken and then put on display for others while you were told they no longer belonged to you? That is Ethiopia's wound, and it has not healed. There is a haunting question that lingers in the air whenever this story is told. If the past of a nation sits in another's library, who truly owns its history? Because history is not just about memory, it is about power. The one who holds the manuscripts holds the narrative, and the one who controls the narrative controls the way the world remembers. And so Ethiopia's call is more than just about books. It is a demand for dignity, a demand for respect, a demand to be the guardian of its own past. For how can a nation move forward if the echoes of its past are kept locked away in someone else's house? Some believe that returning the manuscripts would be an act of justice long delayed. Others argue that history, once taken, can never truly be returned, that the wound is too deep. But Ethiopia has not stopped asking and will not stop asking. And that is where the mystery deepens. Because these manuscripts are more than old words. They carry secrets, stories untold, truths hidden in the folds of time. What might be found if they were studied again, in the land where they were first written? What knowledge still sleeps in their pages, waiting to be awakened? Until they return, Ethiopia's house of memory remains incomplete. The shelves are waiting, the people are waiting, and the world is left to wonder, will the day ever come when history goes home? They say history is written by the victors, but sometime history is stolen, torn out of the hands of those who lived it, and locked away where the world cannot see. The story of the Magdala Manuscripts does not end with their capture. In fact, that's where the real mystery begins, because even after years of searching, scholars admit we still don't know exactly how many books were taken, how many vanished on the long journey, or how many are still hidden away in the dark corners of private collections. Think about that for a moment. These were not just old texts. They were chronicles of kings, records of battles, sacred prayers, poetry, music, and wisdom that stretched back centuries. Entire worlds of thought, lifted from their home in Ethiopia, scattered across Europe, and in some cases, disappearing altogether. Some are known today. You can walk into the British Library and see a few on display, their covers glowing under glass. But others, they slipped into the hands of collectors, diplomats, even looters who sold them for profit. Once they entered private hands, their trail went cold. And with that silence, a haunting question rises. What knowledge was lost forever? Because here's the thing. Some Ethiopian voices believe the most important scrolls, the ones filled with dangerous secrets, never made it to the display cases at all. They may have been tucked away deliberately, locked in vaults, studied in secret, or destroyed to keep their knowledge from resurfacing. Imagine manuscripts describing Ethiopia's ancient connections with distant empires, Egypt, Persia, even India. Imagine texts that spoke of hidden technologies, forgotten medicines, or lost maps. If even a fraction of those claims are true, then the disappearance of these works wasn't just theft. It was erasure. Erasure of a people's memory, a culture's pride, and maybe humanity's shared knowledge. But here's the mystery that keeps historians awake. Every now and then, a manuscript resurfaces. An auction catalog lists an anonymous Ethiopian text. A collector quietly donates a codex to a museum decades after it went missing. Each time it sparks whispers. How many more are still out there? And how many are sitting unread, their owners not even aware of their true worth? And then comes the most unsettling question of all. What if some of the greatest secrets of Ethiopia's past are not lost at all, but deliberately kept out of sight? Hidden in libraries, locked in basements, kept under restricted access by those who fear what truths might come to light. The Magdala manuscripts are more than paper and ink. They are living fragments of a nation's soul. And until every last one is returned, the mystery will remain unfinished. So we are left to wonder, were the most precious scrolls quietly destroyed? Are they waiting, untouched, in dusty boxes somewhere in Europe? Or are they lying closer than we think, in plain sight, disguised by time and neglect? One day someone may open the wrong drawer, or lift the right lid, and reveal what has been hidden for over a century. Until then, the question lingers, and the silence grows louder. The Magdala manuscripts remind us of something powerful, that knowledge can be stolen, scattered, and silenced. But it can never truly be erased. And perhaps, just perhaps, the greatest secrets of Ethiopia are still out there, waiting for the right eyes to see them again. And so, the story closes, but the mystery does not. What do you think still lies hidden, waiting to be found?